Welcome back to our online class. So we'll proceeding with the chapter which we have started in our last class, operating system. So in our last class we have discussed about the introduction to the operating system. So in that we have discussed about the objectives, that is why we need an operating system, what is an operating system, and what is the important role that plays in the computer system. And also we have discussed about the hardware components and the software components. So physical components which we can see, these are all the hardware components, and the software components are those components which are the programs which help us to solve the problem. And also we have discussed about the types of software, application software and system software. System software help us to operate the computer, run the computers, execute the computers, and application software help us to do the specific job or a work. And also we discussed about the desktop operating system, Windows by Microsoft, Macs in Apple Macintosh, Linux, which is a Unix-based operating system. And also we have discussed about the Google Android, Apple operating system, Windows 10 mobile operating system, and BlackBerry. So these are the topic which we have discussed in our previous class. Today we will be discussing about the features of an operating system. Features of an operating system and the function of an operating system. So the features of operating systems are, the main features are multitasking, multi-programming, parallel processing, and device management. So these are the main features of an operating system. Now let us discuss what is multitasking. An operating system can do many work at a time. Task means work. It can work many things at a time. The process where two or more programs are controlled at the same time by the single user is called the multitasking. So one user is there and he is running the two processes simultaneously. One listening music and typing in Microsoft Word. So that is that way that is done. In general, a CPU can perform only one task at a time. However, the program are executed so fast that the two or more tasks seems to be executed at the same time. So one work at a time will be done, but the task it will do very fast that it will do the two things at a time. So that is multitasking. So multitasking means you can take the example, sipping the tea and reading the newspaper. The next feature is multi-programming. The process where two or more programs are stored in the main memory at the same time is called the multi-programming. Multi-programming means you are doing two things and saving it in the same memory. That is called multi-programming. In these features, the CPU switches to execute another task when the first task is on hold. So it switch on one work to work at a time. That is multi-programming. Two or three programs can be executed simultaneously by switching from one to another. The next feature is the parallel processing. Parallel lines. The railway track it forms a parallel lines. That means 2 lines doesn't meet with each other. The river is a parallel. Two sides of the two banks of the river are parallel to each other. Means going straight without meeting at any point. So parallel processing, when the use of two or more CPUs to handle the single task is called the parallel processing. Two or more CPUs are used. When the two or more CPUs are used in order to do the task, single task, that is called parallel processing. It is widely used for computing computer networks. So this parallel processing is generally used when we are networking the computer. Networking means interconnection of computer in order to share the resources. Internet is also network, isn't it? Mobile networks are there. Now, the next most important feature is a device management. So when we think about the devices, the computers have the different devices attached to the system. So different devices. So we can classify the internal hardware, external hardware, if you take it at that way. If you take it in the processing way, input device, processing device, output device. So there are different devices in the computer system. So these devices needs to be managed. How much space needs to be given, how much time needs to be given, everything needs to be checked by the CPU. Sorry, operating system needs to be controlled by the operating system. So device management is one of the important function of the operating system. And the input-output devices of the computers are controlled by the operating system. So input device, output device. You must be knowing, you can differentiate now input device. Anything which are used to feed the data to the computer is the input device, like keyboard, mouse, scanner, barcode reader. So whatever is used to feed the data to the computer is the input device, and output devices are the devices through which we can get back the processed result. That is the output device, monitor, printer, isn't it? So these are the devices. These are controlled, input-output devices are controlled by the operating system. An operating system receives an input through the input device. Operating system input through the input device. An operating system and input through the input device. Operating system receives the input through the input device and input device. The computer performs the specific task based on the input device. So the device which is there, based on the input device, the computer performs the task. The processed output is sent to the output device. In this way, an operating system manages the input-output operation of the computer. Input-output operation of the computer is managed by the output operating system. So, managing the device management is the important task of the operating system. So, when we are sending the data to the computer, it needs to be taken by the input devices, and where you want to store that? Storage devices. CPU, in the CPU it is divided into three types: ALU, control unit and memory. So where you want to keep that? That is decided by the operating system. And after processing the data, the result needs to be displayed on the monitors, or it needs to be stored in some device. That is also looked after by the operating system. So operating systems, one of the most important features of the operating system is the management of devices. So we discussed about multitasking feature, multi-programming features, parallel processing figure, and device management features. Now let us come to the functions of an operating system. The first function of the operating system is the booting. Booting, as you know, is a starting of the computer. The process in which the computer is turned on and off, and the operating system is called the boot. When you press on, power on, self-test, when you on the switch, it takes that automatically the machine starts, all the process starts from the BIOS. That is called booting. So starting of the computer is booting. So what is the function of the booting? Booting checks all the hardware and the software of the computer and loads all the files required to run the computer. Hardware and the software installed in the computers and loads all the files required to run the computer. So starting of the computers where all the files are loaded. Next one is the memory management, or managing the memory. Now in a computer there are many types of software applications. So how much space needs to be allocated to, where to save, keep that, where to store that, how much space needs to be allocated to that particular applications. All these are managed. Memories to be managed. It's how much space where it to be kept. So the main function of the operating system is the memory management. The operating system is required to manage the different programs. The operating system defines the amount of memory needed by each program. In order to execute the program, some memory space is utilized. So if your memory is packed, it will take time to load the program, opening the files, it takes a lot of time. So some space is to be allocated to the memory. So that allocation needs to be done. The operating system defines the amount of memory needed by each program. It keeps aside enough memory for these processes to function smoothly. Next one is loading and execution. What do you mean by loading and execution? Application can be executed only after loading it in the system memory. So the program is stored in the memory that needs to be brought to the CPU processor, and it should be the loading is done. That loading and running of that particular program is also taken care of by the operating system. An operating system has the ability to load the program in the memory and run them whenever they require. So it needs to be brought from the storage device to the processor in order to run the program. So there's this loading, and execution is also one of the function of an operating system. Managing data security. The security is the must. The whatever data are stored, because most computers can store the different data. The data are confidential to individual or to the company or to the corporate, isn't it? So security is very important. How do we make it secure? By giving the username and password. So in order to ensure the security, this security features is also looked up by the operating system. So nobody can access without their proper ID, username and password. So the data is stored on the computer's hard disks in the form of files and folders. The operating system maintains the record of this data. It records the creation, modification, deletion and renaming of all the files and folders. So organizing the files and folders is also done by the operating system. The data might contain sensitive information which needs to be protected from the unauthorized access. So unknown people might take the data without the notice. So this security is also done by the operating system. The main function of the operating system is to protect the data stored on the computer from illegal use, modification and deletion. So if it should not be used, the unauthorized people are not allowed to the computer by the operating system only. So managing the data security is another feature. Managing the disk means hard disk, where the informations are stored. The operating system processes the disk space to store the files and folders. The processed data, unprocessed data, semi-processed data, finished the data which is processed, all needs to be kept somewhere. So that disk space is also managed by the operating system. It also provides the system backup for all the files and folders. So you have the backup of files and folders by the disk, so that they can be recovered as case of computer system crashes. When computer crashes, the backup you can access it. Managing the process is an important function of the operating system. It forms the part of all the applications and program, and operating system allows the CPU, memory and time to conduct all the processes required to store the application. So processes are also managed by the operating system. So another feature function is the peripheral devices. Peripheral devices are all the hardware devices which are connected to the computer CPU. So the operating system acts as a controller between the peripheral devices such as printer, mouse, keyboard, speaker, monitor and the CPU. CPU and peripheral devices are connected. That also is looked after by the operating system. It accepts the command from the user. So input, process and output. So input devices through which we can feed the data to the computer. Processing CPU, it processes the data and it will give to your computer. The result will be given to you through the output device. So all the managing the peripheral devices is also looked after by the operating system. It accepts the command from the user, processes it and sends the output to the peripheral devices. This output is then displayed to the user. So managing the print function which is to be printed out to the output devices, managing the interfaces. So these are some of the important features of an operating system, important functions of an operating system. So booting, memory management, loading and execution, managing the data security, managing the disk. This means the disk where the info files and folders are stored. Managing the process, how much time needs to be given to the particular processes, how fast, how slow, that is also taken care by that. And managing the peripheral devices, these are some of the functions which are taken by the operating system. So this is the functions and the features we have discussed today. In the next class, we will be doing with the types of operating system. I want you to go through this particular chapter, and in any case you can just let me know. So we will be continuing with the types of operating system in the next class. Thank you. Have a nice day.